Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. US President Donald Trump sends a letter to Israeli President Isaac Herzog, urging him to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling the corruption case against his longtime ally political and unjustified. India's President Draupadi Murmu receives a ceremonial welcome in Botswana, marking a historic moment as she becomes the first Indian head of state to visit the country. Australia's High Court dismisses Russia's attempt to construct a new embassy just 400 metres from Parliament House, siding with the government's 2023 decision to revoke the lease over national security concerns raised by Canberra's spy agency. Pakistan ramps up security in Islamabad after a suicide bombing outside a district court that killed 12 people and injured 27 others, the capital's first such attack in nearly 3 years. And Czech authorities begin culling over 70,000 birds after detecting bird flu at 2 commercial farms, as Europe battles with a renewed wave of avian influenza outbreaks. Hello and welcome. Today we begin our show with Egypt's intensified diplomatic efforts aimed at bringing peace to Sudan, where a raging war between the Sudanese army and paramilitary rapid support forces has battered the country. The Egyptian foreign minister met with Sudanese army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The Egyptian minister conveyed President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's greetings during his visit to Port Sudan and reaffirmed the country's unwavering support for Sudan's unity, security and stability. The Egyptian minister reiterated Cairo's ongoing efforts to secure a peace deal through bilateral, regional and international channels and stressed the need to commit to the peace plan. Egypt has also called for the immediate establishment of aid corridors to address the worsening humanitarian crisis. The Egyptian minister also met his Sudanese counterpart in a separate meeting. Both sides discussed expanding cooperation in electricity, water, health, education and reconstruction. They also agreed to convene the second Egypt-Sudan Business Forum, a joint trade committee meeting in Cairo. Meanwhile, Sudan's army chief also met the UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher in Port Sudan. The talks were aimed at ensuring aid deliveries to all corners of the war-ravaged country. Fletcher lauded the constructive talks.
I very much welcome the constructive conversations I had with President Burhan, aimed at ensuring that we can continue to operate everywhere across Sudan to deliver in a neutral, independent, and impartial way for all those who are in such dire need of international support.
Fletcher is in Sudan for a week-long mission, which is focused on peace efforts, upholding the UN Charter, and getting access and funding needed to save lives across the battle lines. Fletcher also met Egyptian diplomats to discuss scaling up aid. The talks come 2 weeks after the RSF captured El Fasher, which was the last army stronghold in western Darfur. The takeover was marred by multiple reports of mass killings, sexual violence, abduction and looting. According to the UN Migration Agency, since El Fasher's fall, nearly 90,000 people have fled, while tens of thousands remain trapped in famine-like conditions. Last week, the RSF said it had agreed to a truce proposal mediated by the US, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Egypt. The Sudanese army is yet to respond to the peace deal, but this did not lead to relief on the ground. The attacks have persisted. Fierce fighting has continued in Darfur and Kordofan. The RSF has deployed forces to the strategic city of Baba Nusa in West Kordofan. It has been threatening to fight until the last moment. The UN Migration Agency said nearly 39,000 people have fled fighting in several towns across the oil-rich Kordofan since the fall of El Fasher. Even as peace efforts continue, The war on the ground is far from over. And as warring sides fight for greater control, the people of Sudan continue to pay the cost. And for more on this, we have with us Meki El-Maghrabi, a Sudanese consultant and former diplomat to the United States. Thank you, Meki, for joining us.
Thank you, Joshua.
I first want to look at the discussions that have been had, the bilateral talks that have taken place in Egypt, or between Egypt and the Sudanese army. Do you think these take anything away from the pursuit of peace in Sudan, considering that there were business talks?
I think that Egyptian-Sudanese relation is a complement rather than a detract for peace, for searching peace in Sudan. So I think that this visit from Egyptian Foreign Minister Badruddin Abdulati is pushing the peace process. But the question here, what kind of peace? Here the question. A proposal of peace that legalizing the militia of RSF and give it a legitimate status, or a proposal of peace that will end the war and end the militia and then go to the process of DDR and completing the peace steps in Sudan. So the word peace is good, and I think Sudan and Egypt, all of them, all other actors that friend of Sudan, they are pushing for peace, but what kind of peace? Here the question.
Yes, and building on that, of course, the Sudanese army are yet to respond to that peace proposal. The RSF have said yes. Why do you think that is? And do you think Egyptian cooperation, one of those four nations who have been overseeing this potential peace deal and mediating, why do you think their cooperation is important?
Actually, let me say the Sudanese government more than the army, because sometimes they portray the issue that is army and paramilitary. You know, there is a Sudanese government, there is a state, there is an existing state, received a proposal from United States in Washington, D.C. During the visit of a delegation from Sudan headed by the foreign minister, Ambassador Muhyiddin Salim. So the foreign minister, which representing the Sudanese government, in bilateral talks with Sudanese, with the U.S. administration, they received that proposal. But let me go back to June, when the United Nations offered a ceasefire or a truce between Sudan and the militia. The Sudanese government accepted, but the militia rejected. And at that time, I didn't hear loud voices attacking the militia because of their refusal to stop or to cease the fire in Al-Fashir, while there was a resolution from the Security Council forcing the militia to go out from Fashir, but they didn't. They didn't implement that resolution. They didn't welcome. They rejected the ceasefire that offered by the United Nations. So that the RSF has very bad records on that issue.
And Meki, as we bring an end to our discussion, I do want to focus our attention now forwards. Of course, discussions, international efforts towards a ceasefire. We heard Tom Fletcher, of course, talking about the need for aid. But what would a ceasefire truly mean for the people of Sudan, who have faced humanitarian crises, civilian deaths and displacement since the start of this war in 2023?
Tom Fletcher is welcomed in Sudan to cooperate directly with Sudan. We are not talking here about the quartet, which is United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates. We are talking about the United Nations, and look here how the Sudanese government, they welcomed Tom Fletcher and United Nations. They welcomed the Egyptian efforts, the Saudi effort. They have very nice and wonderful direct bilateral talks between Sudan and the United States. But the odd word here is UAE, because supporting the militia. So the Sudanese government and even the Sudanese people cannot accept such a proposal coming with a contribution of the party that's supporting the militia. And here is the problem. People need to solve that. But regarding the proposal, that came from United States, Saudi Arabia, United Nations, the cooperation. Sudan is open for that. But having a proposal that manipulated by UAE and put it on the table in a way of take it or leave it, yes or no, that will not work for Sudan. Sudan will keep reviewing the proposal till it reach a point that is applicable and doable and practical and helping people in Sudan.
Yes, of course, optimism over talks towards a potential ceasefire deal, but fighting still on the ground, millions, of course, displaced. But Meki, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing insight.
Thank you, Joshua.
We'll now shift focus to West Africa, where a new diplomatic rift is brewing tensions in the region. Mali's Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maïga, has dropped a diplomatic bombshell, accusing their former colonial ruler France and its northern neighbour of Algeria of backing terrorist groups in the Sahel region.
Today, those on the side of the terrorist groups operating in our region are the French junta and the Algerian junta.
These remarks came in front of a high-profile audience, which included defence officials from Russia, Niger and Burkina Faso. They had all gathered in Bamako for a major military exhibition. Drones, rockets, armoured vehicles and new weapon systems all were unveiled at the Bamex, while Prime Minister Maïga took direct aim at Paris and Algiers. Relations between Mali and France have been in freefall since the 2021 coup that brought military leaders to power. French troops withdrew last year after nearly a decade of counter-terrorism operations. In their place, Russian contractors and mercenaries have taken centre stage in the region. The timing and tone of Maïga's remarks are no coincidence. In recent years, Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso, all under military rule, have formed a new alliance called the Alliance of Sahel States. The bloc, united by anti-French sentiment and growing alignment with Russia, is now the region's new stabilising force. The Mali Prime Minister also used this platform to project the country's defiance, dismissing predictions of state collapse and insisting Mali will stand tall despite external pressure.
Some detractors hoped to see Mali collapse. They wanted to see the Malian people on their knees, divided and weakened. But Mali will not fall, Mali will not sink, because Mali is, above all, its people and its ideals.
And those words, Mali will not fall, underscored the country's bid to defend its sovereignty amid growing turmoil. After years of instability, they are standing firm against what they view as Western interference and propaganda. The remarks came at a time when Mali is fighting to contain a wave of terrorist violence that has gripped most of the country. And now, the African Union is expressing deep concerns over the worsening situation. They say an ongoing fuel blockade imposed by terrorists is impacting civilian lives. For weeks, terrorists linked to Al-Qaeda's affiliate, JNIM, have cut off fuel supplies, creating a crisis for Mali's junta. They are targeting fuel tankers coming from Senegal and the Ivory Coast. The situation is now crippling civilians as the terrorists are abducting locals and foreign nationals. In response, the United States and Britain announced the evacuation of their officials. Paris is also urging all French citizens to temporarily leave Mali as soon as possible. A move that has been deeply welcomed by the locals.
We tell Minister Abdoulaye Diop to never again host a French person, neither a French person nor an American. They are all enemies of Mali. They are hypocrites. They are the ones who need Mali, not the other way around.
We must chase away all French people from our territory and show the whole world, the whites, that they are insignificant in our affairs.
But the junta in Mali has been fighting an uphill battle against the insurgent group since taking power in 2021. Still, Bamako insists it will not bow down to Western pressure. This as Moscow has been quick to step in with arms, training and diplomatic support. The new power shift could now reshape West Africa's political map. France's retreat and Russia's growing alliances in Africa have put the West and Putin's forces in a direct conflict for greater influence on the continent. But beneath the geopolitics lies Mali, a country that has become a centerpiece of the great game in Sahel. Moving on. Are African countries being paid by the Trump administration to accept non-citizen deportees? Well, Equatorial Guinea has been placed under the spotlight by a senior Democrat in the United States. Senator Jeanne Shaheen has questioned $7.5 million that was sent to the Central African nation's government from the United States. That money has come from a fund set aside by Congress to address refugee crises across the world, according to public government data. Senator Shaheen penned a letter to the US Secretary of State voicing her concern.
This highly unusual payment to one of the most corrupt governments in the world raises serious concerns over the responsible, transparent use of American taxpayer dollars. It would far exceed the amount of US foreign assistance provided over the last 8 years combined.
Now, this $7.5 million payment would reportedly be the first government-to-government transfer from this account. And Equatorial Guinea's government, led by President Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mabagaso, and his son, the Vice President Teodoro Nguema Obiang Magwe, has been at the center of corruption scandals. In 2012, the US Department of Justice determined that Vice President Obiang had spent $315 million on properties across the world, supercars and other luxury goods. In 2017, Obiang was convicted by a Parisian court of embezzling tens of millions of dollars and laundering the proceeds through France. Now, in September this year, the US Deputy Secretary of State met with the Vice President on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And the US State Department said that Deputy US Secretary of State Landau and Obiang had agreed to reaffirm joint commitments to deepen commercial and economic ties, combat illegal immigration, and advance security cooperation. But what are non-citizen deportations? Well, US President Donald Trump has made cracking down on illegal migrants a key pillar of his second term, though deporting those migrants has posed a challenge to the US administration. So rather than deporting all of these migrants to their home countries, the US has struck deals with several nations to accept non-citizen or third nation deportees. And several African countries have accepted deportees from America. Since July, the governments of South Sudan and Eswatini have accepted third nation deportations. In August, Rwanda received their first wave of deportees from the United States. Since September, Ghana has accepted dozens of non-citizen deportees from the US. A deal has also been struck between Uganda and the US. It is worth noting that both Nigeria and Burkina Faso have both publicly declined deals from the Trump administration. But controversy has surrounded these deportations to African countries. Human rights monitors have accused nations of housing deportees in inhumane conditions. Meanwhile, fears over human trafficking and human rights abuses have also been raised, while accusations have been tabled that some individuals are being deported again within Africa, but still not to their home country. Africa's role in Donald Trump's anti-immigration policy has been growing in recent months. The deals and outcome for immigrants is firmly under the microscope, not just in Africa, but in the US now as well. And for our last story, let's shift focus to the disputed region of Western Sahara. Its borders with Morocco on Google Maps have pulled the tech giants into a controversy. This as reports highlighted that after the UNSC endorsed the Moroccan autonomy plan, the tech giant removed the borderline between Western Sahara and Morocco on its map for people living in the North African country. While those outside the country can still see a border between Western Sahara and Morocco, Google has released a statement clarifying that different border displays for different places have always been the case. The US-based company added that the dotted lines illustrating the border indicated the former's disputed territory status, which is in accordance with its long-standing policies, and that it has not made any new changes. Western Sahara is a vast mineral-rich region that is largely controlled by Morocco. The coastal desert was under Spanish rule until 1975 and was later annexed by Morocco. The Algeria-backed Polisario Front, which is an armed group seeking full independence from the Sahrawi people, has long contested the Moroccan claim to the territory. This led to bitter fighting in the 1970s and 80s, with the Polisario Front and Morocco agreeing to various ceasefires during the 1990s. But both failed to resolve the underlying dispute. This is a long-promised referendum to allow the people of the region to choose between independence or Moroccan control never took place, owing to the disputes over voting eligibility. The United Nations has deployed peacekeepers to the region since 1991. The international body had urged the parties concerned to resume talks and reach a broad agreement. But now, the UN has approved genuine autonomy for Western Sahara under Morocco's sovereignty, which is a plan initially presented by Rabat in 2007. The UNSC lauded it as the most feasible solution to a 50-year-old conflict. The UN vote followed the initiative of US President Donald Trump's administration. Morocco has now declared October 31st a national holiday to mark the day the UN Security Council voted in favour of its plans. The Royal Palace says the holiday will celebrate Morocco's national unity and territorial integrity. That's it on the show. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.
Straight into the roof of the net.